So Matthew, it's kind of interesting to look here. When Judas' betrayer saw that Jesus was condemned, he repented. Notice both Peter and Judas repented. But they did very, very different things about it. He brought the 30 pieces of silver back to the chief priests and elders and said, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." They said, "So what?" He threw down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed, went out and hanged himself. They took the money and they bought the potter's field. That's been called the field of blood, to fulfill what it was spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. Of course, Matthew is, well, they're all doing this, but Matthew in particular always wants to see prophecy being fulfilled. What we generally, I think, can best see it as is throughout the entirety of the Old Testament, there are an awful lot of things, and you'll see them on the supplement that I gave you, a lot of things that have an uncanny resemblance to events of the passion and death of Jesus. But are they predictions? Or are they kind of a pre-echo, shall we say? Because if we look at prophecy as prediction, 99% of what is contained in the Old Testament never happened again. And it's only this little bit that actually did happen. And, these people who go back to the Old Testament and say, well, we can see things predicted there that are happening now, people have been trying to do that for the last 2,000 years. And hasn't worked in the last 2,000 years, it's not really working now. But I think that what we can say is those who were familiar with the Old Testament, as these events of Jesus were unfolding and as their meaning was being absorbed by the early church, they were drawing all kinds of parallels, all kinds of lines from the Old Testament to the New Testament, seeing, and I think this is significant, seeing a real continuity. So when we talk about these prophecies that especially Matthew speaks about here, is what he's trying to do is draw lines of continuity between the Old Testament and its fulfillment in Jesus. Now, go to the supplement page, and at the upper right-hand corner of page 16, the way that Matthew tells it really echoes. Do we need more copies of it back there? All right. Keep a few of them in case somebody else needs them. The way Matthew tells it really does echo what happened in David's time when Ahithophel was trying to sell David, trying to betray David to his son Absalom. Absalom was trying to revolt against David, his father. And so he says, hey, you let me have 12,000 men, and I've got this plan, and I'll strike down only the king and bring him back. And that pleased Absalom, so he agreed to it. Then when Ahithophel, whatever his name is, saw that his counsel, David sort of escaped from the plot, and he then went off to his own city, set his house in order, and hanged himself. That would seem to be close enough to, okay, well, what happened to Ahithophel is basically what Judas did. It's told very differently in the Acts of the Apostles in Luke. And this is a speech that's in the mouth of Peter in the upper room when they're trying to find another one to fill out the 12. Now this man acquired a field with the reward of his wickedness. So, according to the Acts of the Apostles, after this stuff with Jesus, he goes out, Judas goes out and buys a field. So he profits from it. He's very fine. He's content with what he's doing. He's not at all repenting. But apparently the field may have had some rough ground, and he fell headlong and burst open in his middle, and all his bowels gushed out. See, that's what you get. And this became known to the residents of Jerusalem, so that the field was called in their language Hakeldama, the field of blood. So we end up with the field of blood, but we end up to it with two different stories that lead up to it that really are mutually exclusive. It could not have happened one way and at the same time happened the other way. There's no indication in Acts that he repented or that he hanged himself. Some who really, really want to put them together and harmonize them say that, well, he hanged himself and then the rope broke, he fell on the ground, and then he busted open. And there seems to be a precursor to that kind of death in 2 Maccabees 9:7-10. And the better part of prudence made me not reprint that, but it's kind of graphic. So that's what Matthew does, and we saw what Luke does in the Acts. John and Mark don't mention Judas any further. Now there's something here that is only in Luke, that isn't found in the others. And that's bringing in Herod. Because Pontius Pilate, part of his trying to get out of this demand that the Jewish leaders were making, finds out that Jesus, this is on page 6 in the 3rd column of Luke, 2nd paragraph. When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he was under Herod's jurisdiction, well, send him off to Herod. Basically says Herod was wanting to see Jesus. He questioned him. Jesus gave him no answer. They were accusing him, and then Herod and the soldiers mocked him, and then he sent him back to Pilate and said, you can't dump your garbage on me. Question of jurisdiction here really is the case. Who has jurisdiction in a case like this? Is it where the ruler of where the guy came from, Galilee, or the ruler of where the alleged crime was committed, which would be Jerusalem? And I think what Luke seems to be indicating is that Pilate was passing the buck, and Herod was saying, nope, buddy, it ain't going to work. Now, there's an interesting thing here that Raymond Brown points out again, which I was not really putting two and two together here. But in Luke's gospel, and Luke is the only one who says this, that as he was on his way to Jerusalem, some people come up to Jesus, and talk about these Galileans whose blood Pilate mixed with their sacrifices. That's in 13:1-5. Luke 13:1-5.